What is intuitive painting? It's based on the premise that we're all creative and we all know intuitively what is beautiful. And it seeks to allow people an opportunity to create and express through a mind-body experience. A lot of these intuitive movements are very touchy-feely, with a lot of meditation stuff, which is great. It's all good. It does have a strong meditation and self-exploration influence. Whether you choose to indulge in that, that's completely up to you. So now I'm going to go forward to the next slide and say, no prior painting experience is necessary. So it gives you, intuitive painting is an opportunity to explore your inner self through a creative process in a safe, critic-free environment. And this approach to painting is focused on mindfulness and creative permission and the act of spontaneous expression. Ring a bell? Last week, expressionism, right? Spontaneity. So this is, it's taking the critique out of the process in creating art. And it is a wonderful practice to get into because it's a great warming up experience or exercise before you begin to do your more disciplined work. Should you ever in your life choose to do so again, you may just start doing intuitive painting and say, screw it, I'm done. I found it. This is me. This is all I'm ever going to do, which is great. These are some of the books that I have that I personally own. I would recommend most highly the first one on the left. What is her name? Flora Bowley. She wrote both of the first two books. I just found the first one to be a bit more informative. I think it was her first book. And then I also have the other book, which is also quite interesting, Art from Intuition. So if you feel like exploring this more after your experience this evening, this is an opportunity for you to do that. I did mention we're going to talk a little bit about color. Most of you are familiar with the color wheel. Most of you probably understand that color has emotion. Really tonight, all we're going to be thinking about is warm colors and cool colors. And I know I've mentioned these to you in the past, and I've mentioned them to you as far as aerial perspective, right? Warmer colors come toward you like your friends at a party who are warm and engaging people. And cooler colors tend to recede. And the cooler colors are your purples, your blues, your greens. And your warmer colors tend toward more to the oranges, the reds, and the yellows. And each of these colors has a certain innate property to it. Like we have fickle, red is fickle, right? We've heard that expression. Did you know that red is the first color to fade when exposed to UV light?
No.
Right. Ever heard the expression true blue? Blue is like loyalty, right? Guess what the last color to fade is? You ever see those old posters in the pharmacy window? They're all blue, right? True blue. Ever heard the expression yellow bellied? What is the weakest color in your palette?
Yellow.
Yeah. So all of these expressions we use for a reason. But you want to be aware of other cultures who have other feelings about color. But there is a lot of it that is kind of innate. I have this put together just a little bit about color relationships. I've talked a lot about complements, and the complementary colors are those that are across one another on the color wheel. And we use our complements when we're working wet into wet to dull our colors back. So I've got this red farm, but the barn is really in the back distance, but it's red. And I know if I paint it red, Sue said it's going to come forward, but I want it to sit back. How do I do that? Oh, that's right. I use the complement. So that's the complements on your color wheel. This is a painting by Vincent van Gogh with a very prominent complementary pair of blue and orange. Analogous or analogous, those are colors that are positioned next to each other. This is a real easy way to make a very harmonious painting, right? You just negate the complements and you work with analogous pairs or 3 or 4 of them. This is an example of an analogous painting. You might have heard of this artist. And then we're going to talk about watercolor on Yupo in a little bit. But before we do that, I want to give you guys a little exercise to do. So go ahead and spray your paints down and pull out 2 pieces of paper that are about the same size. Palette out and mix up 2 or 3 warm colors. Warm colors, those would be the yellows, the oranges, the reds. Interestingly enough, this is a green, right? And this is also a green. I have a cool green and I have a warm green. And you will find that to be the case with most of your colors. Here I have a very warm red. That's probably cadmium red medium. And here I have a very cool red, alizarin crimson. So even within each of your colors, you will find a warm and a cool. So if I wanted to put that barn in the field, but it's a red barn, well, I'll use the cool red. If the barn is very close to me and I want it to come forward, I'll use the warm red. See how much smarter you are already? I want you to play. And what I'm going to do is have you pull out 1 piece of paper only. And I'm going to tell you what to do, and you can do it in any way you see fit. I would love you to grab a brush, a round brush, and I would like you to lay that brush into one of your puddles of paint. And then I want you to drag that brush across the paper horizontally. You can drift up, you can drift down, but I want you to go across the paper from left to right. I want you to pick up a little more paint. It can be the same color, it can be a different color. And I want you to drag from left to right, this time varying the pressure on your brush. Now I'd like you to load that brush with another color, lay it onto your paper, and spin it between your finger and your thumb. Pick up another color, put the brush somewhere else, spin it again. Now you can clean your brush, pick up a color, and dragging it from the top toward the bottom, pick your brush up and lay it down, making a scattered line. I'd like you to lay your round brush down, and if you happen to have a flat brush handy, I'd like you to pick that brush up. And I'd like you to load some paint onto that brush. And then using the chisel edge and a very light touch, I'd like you to lay that brush onto your paper and swirl it around. Feel free to cross over and just make a light line through your paper. You can load your brush again. You don't have to clean it if you don't want to. And then using the flat side of the brush, I'd like you to make more angular shapes through your paper. Clean your brush one more time, pick up another color and see if you can throw some of that color. If you can't get it to release from your brush, add some water and throw some paint onto your paper. Now, if you have a straw, go to one of those spots where you just threw pigment and blow on it and see if you can get that pigment to move. I can't find my straw. I want you to blow that paint, spread it out on your paper. And then you can pick your paper up and set it to the side. Clean your palette. And if you just used cool colors, I'd like you to mix up 3 warm colors. And if you just used warm colors, I'd like you to mix up 3 cool colors. I'm mixing up 3 warm colors. So you took a perfectly good piece of watercolor paper and you just proceeded to make a hot mess out of it. So what you've done is you have thwarted yourself from having control. You completely let go of control, okay? And I hope you enjoyed doing it. But Regardless, I'd like you to take that piece of paper and set it to the side and bring a fresh piece of paper over. And I'm going to give you different instructions this time. What I'd like you to do for starters is find your largest flat brush. I want you to dampen your brush, pick up one of your colors, and dragging it from the top to the bottom, I want you to turn the brush in different directions in your hand, sometimes making a horizontal shape or line, sometimes making a vertical line. I just want you to make an abstract pattern coming across on your paper. It doesn't have to be linear. It could be curvilinear. You can vary the pressure on the brush. Just create some gestural marks onto your paper. Now I'd like you to pick up your round brush and charge a second color into the shapes that you just laid down. Charging with watercolor is when we lay wet color into a wet color. Now I want you to pick your big flat brush up again, or you can pick up any flat brush. What I want you to do next is called the thirsty brush. We're going to do a wet lift. So you're going to dampen the brush, you're going to take out all the extra water, and you're going to drag it perpendicular to the paper, right through some of the color that you just laid down. So we're using a thirsty brush, which is a damp brush, and we're doing a wet lift. We're lifting right through the colors that we just laid down. Notice how if you vary the pressure on your brush, you can vary the shape of your lift. Don't always work from left to right. Every once in a while, mess it up and go from right to left. Go from bottom to top. I'd like you to pick up a script liner or a rigger. This is a rigger. And I'd like you to load that with a little bit of a color. And I'm going to say some words, and I want you to make some marks that might represent those words. For example, could you make a dainty mark for me? What says dainty? What about bold? How can you make a bold mark? How do you make a bold statement? What is it to be bold? I don't know, somehow to me it means big. Clean your brush out, pick up a new color. See if you can make me a frenzied mark. What does a frenzied mark look like? Now, if you're lucky enough to have a brush that has a tapered end, like this lucite brush, or if you happen to have a palette knife handy, I'd love for you to scrape into some of your wet paint. Can you scrape? Do you have anything handy nearby? See if you can find something nearby to scrape with. Credit card, an old library card, your pandemic vaccine card if you laminated it. See if you could just scrape through some of that wet paint that you just put down. I want you to just play for a minute, make any shapes you'd like, use any brush you'd like, and understand that rules are made to be broken. And that there are no mistakes. And reflect on this. The moment between what you once were and who you are now becoming is where the dance of life really takes place. And when you're done, you can just set that paper over with your other. And then you can wipe your palette out. I'm going to go back to talking about watercolor on Yupo for a little bit. And then we're going to do a little painting together on Yupo with watercolor. Every week I try to give you guys examples of contemporary artists who are working in where we're working. These are watercolor paintings on Yupo. Yupo is obviously, you've recognized that it's quite different because you've got a piece of it in your possession right now. It's not even paper, it's plastic. So watercolor paper is a sponge, and 140-pound paper absorbs water and pigment at a certain rate. And 300-pound paper, being twice as thick, is a thicker sponge. It absorbs at a different rate, right? Hot press, I think I've said to you, if you've been in my class in the past, you may have heard me say, if you like to work with a lot of detail, you'd probably like working on hot press because it doesn't absorb the pigment as much. It just kind of sits on top until it's dry. So it effectively stays where you put it. Where with other papers, it doesn't stay where you put it. Yupo does not absorb at all. And it's very challenging to glaze. You know, glazing is when you put a wash over dry pigment. Challenging to do, but we're going to play around with it. And I think you're going to enjoy the painting that we're going to do together. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about alcohol ink on Yupo. This is, again, Yupo paper, but instead of watercolor, it's alcohol ink. And it's really quite different. So I'm going to just share some of my work with you on these two different mediums, basically, but on the same surface. This is an abstracted landscape on Yupo. This is watercolor on Yupo. Yeah. And then what I do a lot, and you can just see very little evidence of it, but I'll be doing it with our painting later. I come back in with a Sharpie to add some little details and some structure into my Yupo paintings. This is another watercolor on Yupo, and what I did on this one was I used a blow dryer. And if you use the blow dryer and you keep pumping color in, it creates all these little swirls. But this one wound up looking like people in a chain holding hands to me. Yeah, I tried to direct it to some extent. I used more water here. I used less water here. And I tried to keep the colors limited, right? So I didn't get into too much of a mess. These are alcohol inks. Now, this is a piece of Yupo. You can also do alcohol inks on tiles, little ceramic tiles, glazed tiles. Then you can glaze them and they make great little coasters. This is another little painting that I was playing around with, and I added a little bit of gold leaf to it. I do have a demo to show you tonight for a woman who does this way better than me. Interesting thing about this is that it's all one color. This whole thing was done with this Adirondack eggplant, which is what she uses in the demo that I'll be showing you later. And I don't want to get too into the alcohol inks later, but this is another one. Again, the same color. This is just one color. And remember how I've told you how when watercolor pigments dry, they push against each other and you can kind of see all the colors you use to create the wash? So that's evidently very true with alcohol inks. What we're going to do with our Yupo, I hope that you have a 5x7 piece of paper. If you wanted to do it again, that's just about the way that I put the masking down. I did sketch lightly with my pencil, but in my demo this evening, I'm not going to sketch. I'm just going to show you how to paint this very loosely. I'll show you the basic structure. You probably understand it just as well as I do, but the way that I try to suggest poppies, and we'll kind of work through that together. There's a really interesting area right down here, and I don't know if you can see the detail or not, but I put a piece of paper on top of this while it was wet, and it created that kind of abstract shape, which was just a happy little accident. You're going to want to spray your paints down, and we're going to mix up our colors, and they're basically red, blue, green, and yellow. Those are the three colors I used. The red, the blue, the green, and the yellow that you choose to use are completely up to you. I'll tell you the names of the ones that I'm mixing up, but you don't have to use the same ones. I'm going to use a nice big round to mix my colors up. And for my blue, I'm going to go with the manganese blue. If you don't have manganese and you like that color, cerulean is very, very close to it. Obviously, looks very similar, doesn't it? Cerulean is staining and cerulean is opaque. It will also granulate when it dries. And the manganese doesn't. So I get to get the same color, but I don't have those properties. I'm going to go with my, my fave, Quin Gold. You're like, what? That's not yellow, that's gold. All right, I'll add some yellow to it. I love Quin Gold. I love its transparency. It's just my current favorite. It changes all the time. For the red, I am going to use the cadmium red medium. If you had Scarlet Lake, it's just a little bit more orange, and I really love that color too, but just a nice bright. I'm feeling really, really vibrant tonight. Must be all that intuitive painting. And there's some green, sap green. And I feel like my blue's a little weak, so I'm just going to grab a little cobalt and mix that up beside it. For years, as I've been teaching and working with Yupo, I'm always cautioning my students, be careful how you touch it, because if you get fingerprints on it, it will not accept the paint. But then one of my students a few months ago said, well, I read online that it's plastic so you can wash it. Yes, you can. Darned if that just isn't true. Yes, you can. So if you're painting on a piece of Yupo and it's not accepting your pigment, just take it to the kitchen. Use a little bit of dish detergent and a paper towel and just wash that bad boy down. And you should be perfectly fine with that. The one thing you do not want to do with Yupo is use an eraser on it. It will resist accepting the paint. Poppies. I always want to try to include at least a couple of those wonderful little buds. And they kind of go like a candy cane and then hang off the end, right? They don't have to be quite like little Bo Peep's hook, but you get the idea. Sometimes I try to put in the spent ones, the crumbs that you'll see when you have poppies. Mm-hmm. And basically, there's always that black center. You can't always see it, but it's kind of like a bell-shaped flower, basically round, but the petals overlap one another and then wrap around. That's kind of what I think about when I'm doing my little poppy shapes. Just these weird, elongated, round at the bottom and kind of little tapered at the top shapes. And that's how I create, look at that, it just kind of wrapped it around the back. And that's kind of how I think about my poppies when I'm making poppies. So I basically, when I'm sketching to do a watercolor painting, it's pretty much like this. I just keep drawing until I figure out what it was I was trying to get to. It's going to come down. Your stem is going to be coming right lined up wherever that center is. Remember that your stems shouldn't be too super straight, right? You want them to have some fun, some bend, some curve. Always want to try to have some of your stems crossing over each other just to create that sense of overlapping. Look, there's a bud. But I'm not going to draw on here. I'm just going to play. And I hope you'll play along with me. So I guess I'll work on two. This one, I just came back after I painted it and lifted that white front piece to it and the white front piece to that. So even if your shapes aren't that interesting, we can come back and edit them. So that's one of the wonderful things about Yupo. As a matter of fact, I'll demonstrate that for you right now if you've never used it before. I'm just going to take this flat brush. I'm going to get it wet, and I'm just going to pick up some of that color. And I'll just make the top of this come right in front of that. So you've really got the ability to lift like nobody's business on Yupo. So don't be panicked. Just try to have some fun. All right, I'm mixing up a little more red, and I'm just going to kind of fill in my blobby shapes. I want my flowers to have a melodic line. And I'm kind of making donuts, but I'm making the donuts fatter on one side than the other. A regular shape. I kind of had a leaping off point because I had already put the masking on this. But just try to think about drawing that eye up and back down like a wave. If you want to, you can pick up a little bit of a cooler red and drop it into it and have a variety of color in there. But you can just go with the one color too. But it is possible to charge wet into wet a little bit with your Yupo. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put some blue up in my sky. I'm just going to leave a little bit of a white halo around my reds so that they don't blend together too much. But if they touch together once in a while, I'm not going to worry about that. I think I'll take a little bit of blue and I'll put it underneath a little bit on the right-hand side also. Very loose, very quick, just suggestive. And the colors are just sitting on top. I don't want just blue, you know, a blue stripe, a red stripe, and a green stripe. I want these colors to kind of integrate a little bit into one another. And then, yes, I'm going to come down and put some green and some yellow. I'm going to mix them up. A little bit of green, a little bit of yellow. Some of my red is creeping down. I'm not going to worry about it. If I don't like it later, I can always lift it. That's the wonderful thing about Yupo. Just using my sap green and my queen gold. And then down in the bottom right-hand corner, I'll add a little bit of that darker blue. You know, I like to darken the base of my paintings. And that's pretty much it for starters. If you've got madness going on, feel free to blot at it with your paper towel if you need to control it a little bit. And then just put some color back in. When you're done with that, I'd like you to dry your 2 intuitive paintings because we're going to work on those a little bit more. You can push your colors around. If they went where you didn't want them, you can take a clean brush, push them back up where they belong. If you didn't put in any buds, which I forgot to do, you can always just lift off an area later and add a little clump of buds. Matter of fact, I'll show you how I might do that on the next step when we come back to these. Keep that cool underpainting and mix me up some warm colors. Remember, your warm colors are your reds, your yellows, and your oranges predominantly. I'd like you to take your right index finger, unless you're left-hand dominant, and I'd like you to put it in a puddle of paint and tap it onto your painting. Let's clean our finger, pick up another color, and let's turn the painting 90 degrees and make a few more marks. Did any of you happen to bring a little piece of cardboard with you this week? Because if you did, I'd like you to scoop that into one of your warm colors and make some marks with that. Now you can make your marks by stamping, or you could make your marks by dragging. If you don't happen to have a little piece of cardboard handy, look for a cap. It could be the cap from a tube of paint. It could be the cap from your masking fluid. Let's pick up some paint on that cap and make some marks on our paper. Don't forget to clean it off before you put it back on. Look around you, find whatever you've got handy and stamp. Just stamp for a minute. Oh, turn your paper 90 degrees again. I'd like you to take either a small round brush or a liner brush, and I would like you to draw a leaf onto your paper. Now I want you to make another leaf that's a different size. And then I want you to make a leaf that has a stem. I'd like you to turn your paper 90 degrees. And I want you to just glance around you and draw something that you see. I see a water bottle. Just draw it right on top of everything else. My water bottle is spraying. Let's go ahead and just set that painting aside. Play a little bit more if you want. If you were having fun, I don't want to interrupt you. And then I would like you, well, just go ahead and finish it up and set it aside. Now we're going to take a clean brush and we're going to mix up 3 cool colors. They could be the same 3 you mixed up earlier, but they certainly don't have to be. It could be 3 different shades of blue. If you're kind of blue crazy, like apparently I am. I didn't do any purple yet, so I'm going to do some purple. So everybody is now mixing up 3 cool colors. Here's another thought for you as you begin your next little mark making exercise. First of all, before I give you a thought, I would love to see your warm underpainting. I'm going to give you a thought. Only those who risk going too far can possibly find out how far one can go. If you're not familiar, that was T.S. Eliot who said that. So let's see how far you can go this time. We're going to lay down our warm underpainting. This time we're going to take 3 fingers. We're going to lay them into a puddle of paint. And we're going to drag them across our painting. Oh, Anne. We are taking 3 fingers, laying them into a puddle of paint and dragging them across our painting. Now I want you to pick up a different color. And if you don't play the piano, I want you to pretend that you do on your painting. Okay, everybody, I would like you to take your painting and I would like you to turn it 90 degrees or go wild and crazy and turn it 180, whatever's calling you. And I would love for you to take your script liner and create me a spiral. Now I'd like you to do something a little different with your round, small brush. And I would like you to create a series of blocks by using the side of your brush. Do you see what I'm doing here, guys? I'm trying to stretch your little creative minds and show you that your brushes, your paints, your body, it's a tool. And you can use that tool any way you see fit. You know what's really fun is to go out in the yard and get some sticks and make marks on your painting with the stick. Load that stick into it. And it's just crazy. The things you can find outside and then use them to create interesting shapes in your painting. So we have our little round brush in our hand. I think we're going to try splattering now with the round brush. We're going to just tap. Do you see that maybe it's a little easier to get the paint off the round brush than it was when we tried it with the flat? Now that you've splattered some little dots onto your paper, I'd like you to take your script liner and connect some of those dots. Okay. One more prompt. I would like you to take your spritzer and just spray a little bit of water onto your wet painting. Just if you've got the big one, you can just get a little couple of drops out there And then while some of those drops are still wet, just on one part, lay a paper towel over that wet spot and rub, and then pick your paper towel up. You can set that painting aside. We're going to come back to those. I'm going to show you what I've done with one that I was working on in my last class, just to give you some ideas for what you might want to do this week to post on our Pinterest board. But while we're waiting for that to dry, and before we get back to our UFO painting, I wanted to show you this quick little video of a woman working with alcohol ink. Hopefully I can get that to play for you.
You can see as I add just plain alcohol to the edges of my artwork, it's already changing to another color. As you continue to add colors, you're going to see so many color variations.
She's using that color eggplant, by the way, just the one color, and a blow dryer, and isopropyl alcohol. She's applying it with a pipette, a little plastic pipette, like an eyedropper.
Maneuver around the wet area with the blow dryer, and it'll continue to evolve and change your artwork.
Now she's applying more alcohol, again using the pipette. The alcohol ink.
So here I'm adding another
thinned it down
to it.
And I will fast forward to the end for you, which is stunning. Let's see. Pretty cool, huh?
Yeah.
She put it into a little plastic shot glass and thinned it down with some isopropyl alcohol, straight alcohol.
Oh.
And then in the second little cup, she's got just pure alcohol, and she's using that to thin her color and to clean the paper. She got a color where she didn't want it. But look at that transparency and the flow that she's able to achieve. Now she's going to come in just with the alcohol, and as she lays it onto the alcohol ink, it dissolves it and leaves those little white spots. Really great, fun technique. And I mean, I would happily demo it for you, but you may as well watch her because she really knows what she's doing with it. I love the organic feeling of it. It looks like a flower. When you do buy the alcohol ink, you want to get 90%. Higher the alcohol, the better it works. Mine is 70%. Hers is like 90.
Okay.
So I think that would be a great point to consider. I don't use alcohol inks often. I don't. It's just not part of my practice. But they really are kind of fun. So I just wanted to show you the next step I'm going to do. I obviously have a big mess in here, right? And you may have one in yours as well. What I would do in this instance, sometimes I save them, but this is all you need to do with UPO. Just lift it out. I had a big run up and I didn't care for it. This one, I'm going to let it live. I'm going to let it live, and I'm going to see if I can make it into something interesting, or I could just take part of it out, you know, and then I can just very simply grab a little bit more color and drop it back in there. And then maybe I'll just make sure that color comes a little bit more over on the other side. It's amazing how I can make two identical sized things. It's the last thing you want to do, but it's just my little brain. It'd be much more interesting if there was mostly some and a bit, if I had a big shape and a little shape. But basically what I'm going to do at this point is, maybe if I haven't masked my stems, this is the time when I can come in and paint some stems. Or if I've got a whole huge mass of color, I could come in and lift some stems. And hey, what's wrong with maybe some of each? I lift some shapes as a negative, and I lay in some shapes as a positive shape. So I'm going to start down here at the base, and I'm just going to try to make it more interesting. A lot of times I'll just paint shapes between what will become my stems. I would probably not darken this whole lower passage. I'd rather just see some of that in a certain area and not, it's sometimes we'll paint something and we go, oh, that's really cool. And then we do it 6 more times, and it's really not cool anymore. We're stamping. Want to make sure that you give some area of just light relief. Really, the last thing I would do to this is to mix up some red, some green, and some blue to create a black. And I would just stick my little centers into my flowers. So you can come in and paint on top of other colors with Yupo. You just have to be very careful about just laying that color down. I could also make this petal go in front of that petal just by lifting a little bit on top of it. So I can create some of the structure of these flowers. This is just a big mess. How can I make that look like a flower? Maybe if I just lift a little bit off the front here, I'll make that front petal a little white. The best way to go about doing this is to pull up red poppies onto your browser and look at the shapes of those poppies and get some of those shapes in. You don't need a ton of them. You just need a few. If you get a few shapes to work, then you can walk away. Play with your intuitive paintings. Look for shapes in the painting. I thought I saw this girl and her hair was kind of, so I outlined it with a little Sharpie. And I took a Sharpie and I outlined some of the shapes. I lifted some of the shapes. But this was the same exercise that you guys did. And I just kept turning it and looking at it. It's also one of those things that you don't have to stop. You know, you can just keep coming back to it. And so before you sit down to paint, guys, just keep that little intuitive painting handy or have a couple of them and sit and play for a minute. Look for the little shapes that you made or create new shapes and just have fun. And think about the intuitive art movement and look at it online. And I would love to see where you take your pieces, what kind of things you can create with them. Questions, thoughts, comments, favorite quotes, affirmations, anything. Okay, you're all muted, so I can't again.
Have enjoyed this class immensely. I have abstract is not my nature. I'm very regimented and measured. Might not like what I've done, but I know how to look at it and move forward now.
That is so wonderful. And I think that we get so bound up and uptight and frustrated because it's not what we wanted. And I will tell you that more paintings fail because the artist had to be what they thought it needed to be from the beginning. But the thing with watercolor especially, you know, it does its own thing. It's, you know, and you've just got to try to make peace with it and, you know, walk away. So I'm glad so much, Sue. I appreciate you sharing that. And I'm glad you got a lot out of the class. Because really, guys, if you're not having fun, what are you doing? Yeah, right? Exactly. Life is too short.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like when I play golf, I get very frustrated because I didn't hit that shot. Who am I kidding? You know, the LPGA is not looking for me. Have fun. Enjoy the sunshine.
That's a good comparison.
Yeah.
I play golf.
Yeah.
Me too.
So Sue, I really enjoyed this as well.
Oh, thank you.
I've loved it. I've loved. I'm so glad I took this abstract.
Oh, thank you, Anne.
It's way. I almost love it. I don't know if I want to go back to traditional little paintings.
But you know what will happen is you will bring this with you to your traditional little paintings and you're going to make a mistake and you're going to go, hey, that's kind of cool. And your paintings are going to be so much more interesting. So yeah, I'm excited to see where you go.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Excellent.
Awesome.
And Pauline, did you have a comment?
I was just saying, I wasn't even sure if I wanted to take the class, but I'm really glad I did take the class.
That's great.
Because, you know, my left brain thing and yeah. So
yeah, and I think that I fight with my left brain constantly. I just
Yeah.
light things up, and
It's-
I love my left brain, and we're all rewarded for our left brains. And we
Yeah.
don't often give our right brain the opportunity to, you know, to have some fun.